Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something pretty unique, actually. It's this conversation between a human, Alex O'Connor, and, well, ChatGPT.
Right. And they weren't just chatting about the weather.
No, definitely not. They jumped right into some huge questions, like fundamental stuff about reality, about why things exist at all.
Exactly. And what makes this source so interesting, I think, is the approach. It starts with really simple things you just accept as facts,
Yeah, basic observations.
basic observations, and then it just follows the logic step by step and ends up somewhere, well, somewhere pretty profound, maybe even surprising for some listeners. So our goal today is really to unpack that conversation for you.
Follow the trail.
Yeah, follow the trail, see how the logic unfolds, and maybe pinpoint those moments where you go, aha, okay, I see how they got there.
It's like, what happens if you really push an AI, one designed just to give you facts, about the why behind everything? Where does that purely factual approach take you?
And they set a key rule right at the start, didn't they?
They did. Only facts, or things that logically follow from facts. No beliefs allowed in the mix.
Okay, so let's dive in. Let's follow this logical path they carved out and see where it led, according to the AI's own reasoning from those agreed upon facts.
All right, let's unpack it. So the conversation really starts on solid ground. The human, Alex, makes sure they're on the same page. ChatGPT states facts, right? Not opinions, not beliefs. And they test it. Like, is the sky blue? Fact, yes. Do microphones exist? Fact, yes. The AI pulls this from its data.
And that was super important, wasn't it? Because it set the rules for everything else. Whatever came next had to be either a fact the AI already knew or something that logically had to be true based on those facts.
Exactly. And the human even confirms, hey, I've got a microphone right here. So its existence became like a verified fact within their chat.
Right there in the room, yeah.
Okay, so fact, microphone exists. Then comes the big question, why? Why is that microphone there? Could it just be? For no reason.
And the AI's response was kind of interesting there. It didn't just say, I don't know. It sort of pushed back.
It did. It said something like, well, complex things like microphones don't usually just pop into existence randomly. They tend to have a purpose or, a cause for being there.
It implied it makes more sense that someone, put it there or made it.
Yeah.
There's a reason behind it being there rather than not being there.
And this is where the AI acknowledging that need for explanation becomes really key, I think. It's not just what it is, but that it is.
Precisely. The existence itself demands some kind of account.
Okay, so this need for an explanation leads them to this really important distinction. They bring up contingent truths versus necessary truths.
Yeah, this is fundamental to their whole argument.
Yeah.
So contingent truths, those are things that are true, but they didn't have to be, right?
Right, like the microphone, it's true it's on the desk, but it could easily not be there. Its existence depends on other things, someone buying it, putting it there, the desk existing.
It's conditional. Its truth relies on circumstances.
Okay, and then necessary truths.
Those are the things that just have to be true. True in every possible world, you could say. Like definitions, all bachelors are unmarried, or mathematical truths, 2 + 2 = 4. They can't not be true.
They're true just by what they are.
Exactly. By definition or by the rules of logic itself.
So the conversation naturally goes to, okay, do these necessary truths need an explanation in the same way the microphone does?
And the AI draws a line there. It says necessary truths, because they're true inherently, don't need an external cause to explain them. Their truth is sort of self-contained.
But contingent truths.
Those always point outside themselves. Their existence, their truth, relies on external factors or causes. They need that explanation from something else.
So back to the microphone. It exists, that's a fact. It's contingent, could have been otherwise. Therefore, it needs an external explanation, some cause for why it's there.
Makes sense. That follows logically from the distinction they set up.
Okay, so if this contingent thing, the microphone, needs an external explanation, what kind of explanation? The human pushed on this. Could it be explained by just like an abstract fact? 2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah, and the AI clarified that. For something physical, something concrete like a microphone, the explanation can't just be an abstract idea.
It needs something real.
Exactly. It needs other beings or entities. The people who designed it, the factory machines that assembled it, the raw materials it's made from. Stuff that actually exists in the world.
So a physical object needs a physical cause, or at least a cause involving other existing things, maybe agents with intention, not just numbers.
Right. That's the logical next step they took. Abstracts don't build microphones.
And to make this clearer, they use that analogy, right? The microphone stand.
Yeah, the microphone's held up by the stand. The stand is supported by the floor. It's a chain of dependence.
One thing relying on the next.
And the AI specifically highlights that dependence. The stand only holds the mic because the floor holds the stand. The floor holds the stand because the foundations hold the floor, and so on.
Which led to this really crucial idea discussed in the source. Does the stand have its own power to hold the mic inherently?
And the human suggests, no, it kind of borrows that power, right? Borrows it from the floor. And the AI agrees with this.
The stand's ability isn't fundamental. It's derived from the floor's support. And the floor, well, it's contingent too, so it must be borrowing its support from the foundations.
And you see where this is going. It implies that contingent things don't have their own ultimate causal power. Their ability to do anything, even just to exist or support something else, is always dependent on or borrowed from whatever's supporting them.
Okay, so let's pause there. If every single thing in this chain is contingent, and each one is just borrowing its causal power from the thing below it,
And that one borrows from the next.
and the next, and what if that chain of borrowers goes on forever? An infinite chain of borrowing.
Where does the actual power come from? That's the core of the issue they hit upon. If it's just borrowing all the way down infinitely, and no single thing in that infinite chain actually has the power in the first place.
Then how does the first thing, the microphone, get held up at all? If everyone's just passing along borrowed power, but there's no original lender.
The whole system lacks a source. The entire chain, even an infinite one, couldn't actually ground the existence or the causal efficacy of anything in it.
And importantly, the AI didn't treat this as just like a philosophical brain teaser. It confirmed it as a logical implication.
Right. Based on how they defined contingency and causation, an infinite regress of purely contingent causes is insufficient.
Yeah.
It logically fails to explain why anything contingent exists. There's no ultimate source of the being or the power.
So if the infinite borrowing chain doesn't work logically,
Then they're forced back to the only other option they'd really identified. The chain can't go down infinitely through contingent things.
it has to stop somewhere.
It has to bottom out. It must ultimately rely on something that isn't contingent, something that doesn't need to borrow its existence or its power.
Something necessary.
Exactly. A necessary being or foundation, something that exists and have causal power just by its own nature, inherently. It wouldn't depend on anything else.
And that would be the ultimate non-borrowed source. The buck stops there, so to speak. It explains the whole contingent chain above it.
That was the conclusion reached in the conversation. Following their agreed facts Mike exists, it's contingent. Contingent things borrow power. Infinite borrowing fails. The logical endpoint was this necessary being.
The microphone's existence, and by extension anything contingent, ultimately points back to some kind of necessarily existing foundation.
And again, the AI framed this not as a belief, but as a factual implication derived from the premises they had discussed.
Okay, now this is where it gets even more cosmic, literally. The conversation pivots to science. The human asks ChatGPT, how old's the universe?
And the AI gives the standard scientific answer, right? About 13.8 billion years. Started with the Big Bang.
But the key part was how the AI described it. It explicitly said the universe hasn't existed eternally in the past, but had a specific starting point.
That's a crucial piece of data they brought in. The universe, according to science, as stated by the AI, began to exist.
So, if it began to exist, does that make the whole universe contingent?
And the AI's answer, based on their prior definitions, was yes. If it began, it didn't have to exist. Its existence isn't necessary in itself.
Which means
It relies on something else.
Yeah.
And what else could it rely on, given their previous conclusion?
that necessary being, the ultimate cause they just reasoned must exist.
So the universe itself is contingent upon this necessary foundation.
Okay, but wait, this raises a really interesting question, which the human brought up. If the necessary being is the cause, and it exists necessarily meaning it's always existed, it can't not exist.
Right, it's eternal by nature.
Then why hasn't the universe always existed too? If the cause is eternal, why wasn't the effect eternal? Why the 13.8 billion year starting point?
That's a great question. And the AI's response here was absolutely critical to where the conversation went next.
What did it say?
It basically said that the necessary being causally sufficient, doesn't mean the effect must be automatic and eternal.
Meaning
There could be conditions or reasons why the necessary being brought the universe into existence at a particular time. It wasn't just an inevitable, timeless consequence.
so it wasn't like the sun just automatically shining, it was more like a choice.
That's what seemed to be implied. The AI's reasoning, following the conversation's path, suggested the necessary being wasn't just an impersonal force, but something capable of initiating creation when it happened. It used words suggesting agency.
Like will or decision.
Exactly. Will, decision, intentionality, words that imply capacity to act, to choose when to create, rather than the universe just flowing out of it eternally. The finite beginning of the universe pointed towards this kind of property and its necessary cause.
Okay, let's piece this together then. Following the logic and facts laid out in this specific source, they arrived at a necessary being.
Exists eternally, can't not exist.
Exists outside the universe because the universe had a beginning and is contingent.
Is the ultimate cause of the universe.
And has some kind of will or intentionality, which explains why the universe began at a specific time instead of being eternal itself.
That's the profile they built, step by step, through their logical deductions based on the initial facts.
So the final step. The human asks the AI, okay, given that description we just arrived at, what's the most common name for a being like that?
Based purely on the characteristics they had deduced logically.
And the AI's answer, sticking to its factual programming and the logic they'd followed, was God.
It identified God as the label most commonly associated with the profile of a necessary, eternal, intentional creator of the universe, so the very profile they had constructed through their Q&A.
The AI explicitly stated, based on their reasoning, their factual premises, the conclusion is that such a being, typically called God, exists. It presented it as the logical outcome of their specific dialogue.
Yeah, it framed it as a factual implication of the entire line of argument they had pursued together.
And just to be absolutely sure, the human asks again, is it a fact that God exists based on this reasoning?
And the AI, staying within its constraints, only facts or logical implications of facts confirmed. Yes, based on this reasoning process, it is a factual implication.
Wow.
And it's really worth highlighting, as the source material itself does, that the human insisted they hadn't tried to lead the AI here. The claim is the AI reached this conclusion by processing the facts and logical steps they discussed.
Right, just following the chain from the microphone onwards.
Exactly.
So, starting with a simple object, a microphone, and rigorously following a specific line of reasoning about existence, contingency, cause, infinity, and the universe's origin. This conversation, as documented, ends with the AI concluding that, as a matter of factual implication based on that reasoning, a necessary being, commonly called God, exists.
It's quite a stark demonstration, isn't it? It shows where one particular path of asking why can lead if you stick rigidly to its logical steps and start from certain factual premises.
Now, obviously, people can debate the premises or the definitions or the steps in the logic.
Of course.
But the value here, I think, is seeing a clear map of how someone could construct this argument. How you get from A, a microphone exists, to Z, a necessary creator exists, through what's presented as a purely logical, fact-based progression.
It definitely makes you think about those core concepts, contingency, necessity, causality. What do they really mean? What happens if we accept that dependent things need an independent source? It pushes you to examine the foundations of explanation itself.
So here's maybe a final thought to leave you with. If this particular chain of logic explored in the source suggests that explaining contingent things ultimately requires invoking a necessary being, what does that imply about how we understand anything that exists but doesn't seem to contain the reason for its own existence within itself? Does everything point beyond itself in some way?
That's a deep question.
Yeah.
We've taken our deep dive into this really thought-provoking exchange. We hope walking through it has given you, well, a fresh perspective on these huge questions of why we and the universe are here at all.